The most recent report from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, may have used some stark language when it said, effectively, it's now or never to limit global warming. But that also means some good news. We can still do something. Two of the lead authors of that report are Canadian, and they join us tonight. And as is our custom, we'll introduce our guests from furthest away to closest to our studio, starting in Vancouver, British Columbia, with Mark Jaccard. He is Professor of Sustainable Energy at Fraser University and the author of The Citizen's Guide to Climate Success, Overcoming Myths That Hinder Progress. And in Waterloo, Ontario, Sarah Burch, Canada Research Chair and Executive Director of the Interdisciplinary Centre on Climate Change at the University of Waterloo. And we're delighted to have you two back on our program for a timely discussion about this report that has just come out. And before you take us through it, you two, we thought it might be useful to play a clip from the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, reacting to this latest report. Sheldon, if you would.
This report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a litany of broken climate promises. It is a file of shame, cataloguing the empty pledges that put us firmly on track towards an unlivable world. We are on a fast track to climate disaster.
That is a pretty stinging indictment from the UN Secretary General. And Mark Jaccard, I wonder if you share his view.
Yes, I do. We need to be moving very fast, and we're not there yet. So, and we knew that from the other IPCC reports. Sarah and I are on the report that's looking at how to reduce emissions, but we knew that from the previous reports as they've come out. Humanity is still not doing nearly what it needs to do.
In which case, Sarah, could you start us off by highlighting some of the main findings of this newest report?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of detail, lots of complexity in this report, but there's two really strong messages that come through that I think we need to pay particular attention to. The first is, of course, the fairly grim news that if we look back over the last 10 years, we've seen the largest average annual increase in greenhouse gas emissions that we've seen in human history. So that means that we are not on track to limit warming to 1.5 degrees to prevent the worst of climate change impacts. However, the flip side of that is that for the first time, we're seeing real evidence of sustained actual greenhouse gas reductions in some countries that aren't just a blip because of an economic recession or a public health crisis like COVID. So those are two messages that are at tension with one another, but come through very strongly.
And Mark, what would you say distinguishes this report from its previous ones?
Well, first of all, I really agree with how Sarah characterized it, because it's a stark warning, but she's also pointed out, which does come out, and those of us who worked on this for such a long time, that there are 20, 25 countries whose emissions are going down, and there are sectors in countries whose emissions are going down. But the message to us, at least in the area that I was working on, Sarah may have other things to add, but I'm on climate policy. So we have carbon taxes, we have regulations, sometimes government subsidies. We have those in some jurisdictions. They need to be far more stringent and increasing in stringency far more quickly. Some countries are doing better than others, but that's really the part of the report that I was involved in, was saying you don't get those fast reductions. Wherever you get the fast reductions, it's because of policies like that. Countries just setting targets it doesn't help us at all. And Canada has a history of that, where we've set targets but haven't implemented the policy. So our big message from this IPCC report is to really catalog the places on the planet where people put in the right policies and got those kind of effects that Sarah's talking about, which is good news if we can get others to be doing that.
We'll come back later in our conversation to how well Canada is or isn't doing on some of the things that you would like to see us doing. But again, Sarah, why don't you take us through what, in your judgment, are the main takeaways of this report in terms of what we need to be doing now? Recommendations, please.
Right. So the main insight is that, as Mark alluded to, we need immediate, accelerated, and very deep reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in all sectors and in all regions to hold on to that 1.5 degree target. Again, the flip side, though, is that we have evidence of solutions in all sectors. So there are some sectors that are easier to abate, where we have very ready technologies and lots of solutions at our disposal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least half by 2030. So that's that shorter term goal. And we're seeing evidence of those. So, for instance, in buildings, building them to retrofitting existing buildings, and of course new buildings as well, to a much higher standard of efficiency. Of course, moving away from natural gas for heat and towards renewable energy. Another bit of good news from this report, evidence that the seeds are planted of this deeper transition, is that we're seeing a plummeting in the cost of really crucial renewable energy technologies. So solar coming down by 85%, wind by 55%, and lithium ion batteries, which are a really important piece of the puzzle, down by 85% as well. So in many cases, those technologies already exist to get us at least a large portion of the way we need to go.
Mark, do you want to build on that answer in terms of telling us how we're going to get the carbon out of the atmosphere?
So I agree with what Sarah said. And I think we have to remember that in different places on the planet, we may do other things as well, not just renewables. And I think she would agree. I mean, Ontario refurbishing nuclear power to some extent, that happening in other directions. Also, where we might still, regions that are well endowed with fossil fuels and that might still use those fossil fuels can actually capture the carbon while they convert it to hydrogen that we can use, or to electricity. So those things are, and we can talk more about that if you want, but carbon capture and then burying it in deep underground is something that we're already doing, and we may end up doing more of that.
Yeah, by all means follow up on that if you would, because people hear this expression carbon capture and storage all the time. I'm not sure, A, they know what it means, or B, how it actually happens. Help us with that.
Okay, so a coal-fired power plant in Ontario, when you had them, instead of closing them or converting to using wood, you could have captured the CO2, which is maybe 6% of the flue gas going up the pipe. So you'd have a way to separate the CO2 from that gas, and then you can send it in pipelines, and you can literally bury it underground in deep saline aquifers that are way below the freshwater aquifers. So we're doing that around the world already. We know the technology, we know the cost. Scaling it up would be pretty difficult, which is why I lean more towards the renewables, as Sarah does. But what the report also said was, gee, actually we're at 420 parts per million. The whole problem is we already put too much stuff up in the atmosphere, and nature's not going to take it down fast enough. So we should be extracting carbon from the atmosphere and then burying that underground. And so we call that carbon dioxide, direct air capture is a term for that. So we actually have technologies now, they're just in their infancy, but that would capture CO2 and then do the storage that I'm talking about. And all of this is with known technologies, some of them that are 100 years old. But it'll be expensive. But the point of this latest IPCC report was to say, we need to be doing this even if you don't want to use coal anymore. And the report said, well, we shouldn't have unabated coal. And by unabated, they meant capture the CO2 if you still have a coal plant. But they're also saying, we just have to get CO2 out of the atmosphere now. There's way too much up there, so we're going to need this technology. And
a quick follow-up with you, Mark. It really is feasible to have machines pulling carbon out of the atmosphere? I mean, you say it's 100 years. Some of these ideas go back 100 years, but this sounds pretty space age.
Right. So the 100-year-old one is, you can take coal. The Germans did it even in the Second World War, and convert it into a synthesis fuel that you then convert all the way to hydrogen and capture the carbon. So, and they, the Germans had to scale that up in the Second World War because they couldn't get to oil. So the technology's well known. But extracting carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, well, I mentioned where you do it sort of mechanically, and we so in Vancouver, there is outside of Vancouver in Squamish, there's carbon engineering, an investment that Bill Gates was really originally involved in, and they're in the process of making major investments right now, and that is to you basically take air and you run it through a fan, and then you have a chemical reaction to separate the CO2, the carbon dioxide, from the other gases, and that's tricky, right? Because the carbon dioxide is only at 400 parts per million. So it's a tiny percentage in the air that's coming through. And so these things will use a lot of energy as well. So we're trying to set them up where they can use surplus wind, like build one in Texas or Kansas, or surplus energy of some kind. There's one going in Iceland, and that's going to use, I think, the surplus hydropower they have. So you need energy to do it. So you really want to be doing what Sarah said. You want to be going to renewable energy for 90% of the solution here. But we do need to do the carbon capture, and there are technologies that we can do it with. But they're not totally proven on scale up. So there's lots of work to do.
Gotcha. All right, Sarah, let me get you, if I can, to focus on the just released Canadian budget, in which there were emissions reduction plans in the budget. The federal government did introduce an investment tax credit to encourage carbon capture and storage. Let me get your take on how well you think that budget will get us to where we need to go.
Well, listen, I think there's strong appeal behind the use of carbon capture and storage to both as sort of an emergency measure to deal with the greenhouse gas emissions that are coming from fossil fuel extraction and combustion that we can't get ourselves out of. And in countries like Canada that, of course, economically rely or historically have rely so significantly on the oil and gas sector, those are appealing. But what worries me about carbon capture and storage and carbon dioxide removal coming to dominate our conversation and our spending is that it's the real reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning our supply away from fossil fuels and towards renewables, but also reducing our demand for those fossil fuels through building efficiency, through moving away from single occupancy vehicles and towards active transportation, building our communities so that they're more compact and complete so that we don't have to travel so far to get from work to recreation to services, this kind of thing. These are the real reductions that both ratchet down greenhouse gas emissions and offer an incredible menu of what we call co-benefits, of other benefits to our public health, improved air quality, cleaner water, richer nature, opportunities for justice and equity in our communities that are part of what I would call a more fully sustainable or low carbon resilient community, not simply one that is lower carbon.
So if I can use this analogy, Sarah, which I hear frequently from policy people, things like a greater commitment to renewables is a more upstream solution, whereas carbon capture and storage is a more downstream solution, and upstream solutions are better. Is that fair to say?
They offer a much broader range of benefits to people, to communities. They start to uncover the deeper drivers of emissions that have gotten us here in the first place. They tackle sort of the root causes of the problem. So I think they offer a lot more in terms of, bringing into being the healthy, sustainable, biodiverse, livable communities that we might collectively be aiming for. So there isn't just, we don't just have one thing on our list of objectives in our communities across Canada and around the world. Greenhouse gas emissions are absolutely crucial to tackle to avoid the worst of climate change impacts, but there's more that we want.
Mark, what was your take on how well the budget did what you think needs to be done?
So I want to say, and this is a fun contrast for Sarah and I, because she works in the area of urban design and livability, and I really agree with and respect a lot of the work and what they did on the IPCC with that. I'm a bit more in the energy system, and so I'll tend to point out when Sarah says, when she just did, she said, we'll have more active transportation, which I agree with, and we'll have cities built so that there's mixed use and you're not having to walk as much and more energy efficient. But even when I look around the world at where we've had success in that, in Scandinavian cities, for example, you'll see that they are moving rapidly to fuel switching. And so what I liked about the federal policy, what I would emphasize, is they're finally putting in something I've been calling for, and I've been hounding ministers about this for decades, whether it was liberal or conservative governments, was to put in a policy that forces the auto industry to stop saying we think we're going to make a lot of electric cars, and instead to actually say your percentage sales of electric cars needs to rise over time, or you're paying a penalty of $20,000 per car. And that means you're going to have to figure out a way to, maybe you're going to charge a little bit more money for the expensive gasoline car in order to subsidize electric cars so that their price is cheaper and they're accessible to more Canadians. And that's a policy that California put in 10 years ago. British Columbia and Quebec have copied it. And I was thrilled to see that the federal government has copied that policy, or has committed to copy it. And now they're doing, and while they're doing it, though, what I'm saying to them is, while they're designing it, I'm saying, so you don't need to talk to the auto industry. Here are all the different things. They're going to tell you why it's not possible, but it's actually possible and is happening. So you don't need to talk to them. The policy's been implemented elsewhere. I was thrilled to see that. It means that in a place like where Sarah lives in Waterloo, yes, maybe you'll have better urban form and transportation, like the transit line they've put in, but people are still going to use cars. And so those cars need to be zero emission.
Sarah, you're good with this policy take as well, I presume?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree that it's a really important step forward. And I would say, one of the things that I found most fascinating in this IPCC assessment report was that, on the one hand, the report found that individual choices are responsible for an enormous portion of our emissions, 40 to 70%. However, individuals are locked into high carbon pathways. If we don't have a range of affordable electric vehicles as options, if we don't have convenient and accessible active or mass transit infrastructure, don't have buildings built to extremely high efficiency standards that are off natural gas, et cetera, if we don't have access to those options, our hands are tied. And so the potential for individual choice to move us, onto these low carbon pathways has to be unleashed by these collective decisions that our elected officials, that our politicians and decision makers make on our behalf. And exactly what Mark describes is one important ingredient in that decision.
Well, Sarah, this is a bit off the path, but I'm curious as to your reaction to this anyway. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, made an announcement a week or so ago, I guess crowing about a bunch of things. Number one, all the money Ontario was putting into subsidizing new electric vehicle production in numerous locations, actually, around the province. And number two, the fact that EV sales had gone up significantly during the last 4 years in Ontario, and he was taking credit for it. I wonder whether you think he's entitled to, given that the first couple of years he was in power, he ripped out all the charging stations that the previous government had started to build.
I think it's a bit of a stretch to claim credit for that. I think EVs are finally taking off because of the evolution of the technology. There's less of this range anxiety that folks have had for a long time. There's a wider variety of models available, and some of those are in more affordable brackets. So I do think that the move towards increased EV manufacturing in Ontario is a really important one, to ensure that those folks whose jobs and livelihoods were reliant on the manufacture of typical internal combustion engine vehicles, moving those folks towards the jobs in producing EVs will be a really important aspect of a just and inclusive transition here in Ontario, for sure.
Mark, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So the budget, I guess, was a giveth. I want to know your impressions of the taketh away. And on that score, we're talking about building the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which the current federal government still supports, and the approval of Baie du Nord, this Quebec oil project off the shores of Newfoundland and Labrador, which again doesn't sound consistent with a government that is really serious about reducing the effects of climate change. What was your view?
Right. So, and this is where Sarah and I may differ. I don't know, but I can give you. I have to give you the short version. Basically, I can explain, and I do this in various venues, how if I or you or Sarah were Prime Minister of Canada, an incredibly diverse huge federal system in which provinces have control over energy, and in which some provinces are wealthier than others, and some have fossil fuel endowments. They have a lot of oil or oil sands or coal. How it would be very difficult, and you may have to make compromises. You may say, I'm going to come in with aggressive climate policy, but it's going to be hard to say to people in Newfoundland, oh, yeah, I know, as long as we're not yet, and Doug Ford hasn't helped with this, which is he fought the carbon price that's important. If we are not moving quickly to electric vehicles or hydrogen vehicles yet, then oil will be produced somewhere on the planet. Though I'm an energy economist, the oil markets equilibrate. It will be produced somewhere. So it's very difficult for a prime minister, even when he's trying to move rapidly forward with reducing our oil consumption, to say that I'm not going to let this region of the country take an opportunity to produce some oil for this global oil market. And likewise, to say to a region like Alberta, even though energy economists like Andrew Leach at U of Alberta, others I know, have said really the purpose of the Trans Mountain Pipeline won't really increase oil production, but it'll get a better price for Albertans. They won't have to sell oil through the United States at a discount. It's pretty hard for a prime minister to say, I'm going to do those things. Now let's get into a big national battle that will probably take away our energies from climate policy. So that's my short version, and I don't want to justify it totally, but I'm shocked sometimes when some of my colleagues don't understand that if they were prime minister, they might have to make some decisions, because it's part of compromise in a democracy with different points of view.
Okay, Sarah, your turn to weigh in on that one.
Mark might be surprised that I actually, I agree in large part that there are really tough decisions to be made about how we supply the fossil fuels that we still do need. I would just say that we also do need to look ahead and acknowledge the reality that this may become a stranded asset 30 years from now. And this is a worrisome state of affairs, that building new fossil fuel infrastructure, difficulty of the decision aside, have and have not provinces aside, which it's hard to set those aside. Those are the realities of decision making in the Canadian context. But we know that ultimately, to keep 1.5 degrees within reach, we have to move away from the extraction and combustion of fossil fuels. And so in the longer term, or in the medium term, this may become one of those stranded assets.
In which case, in our last couple of minutes, I'd like a minute from each of you on one thing people watching or listening to this can do starting today and into the future that'll help us get to where we need to go to. Mark, go ahead.
Get rid of gasoline and increasingly even diesel. Like say you buy a diesel pickup truck. The electric are coming on strong. There's even biofuel options. But the biggest thing would be to get a ZEV, a zero-emission vehicle, and do it the way I first got a zero-emission vehicle, is buy it with some friends, or do what another friend of mine did, is buy a second-hand one.
Gotcha. Sarah, your one takeaway?
Yeah, well, I think we have different roles to play here, Mark and I, and I think that that climate change is less a technical problem than it is a social and a political problem. So my single most important recommendation, although I think that Mark's are right up there as well, would be to vote and talk about it. So, we're part of a really powerful conversation right now about how to move faster, about what responsibility we bear, finding common ground, finding shared values that we want to sort of bring into being, and what we want Canada to look like 30 years from now. So you need to write letters, you need to make phone calls, you need to vote when you have the opportunity, so that the collective decisions can be made that can unshackle us from these high carbon pathways and keep that 1.5 degree target within reach.
You may not have seen it, but he gave you a big thumbs up on that incident.
Can I just add that I agree completely, and it's pretty important in Ontario right now. And one of the things that I talk about in the book of mine that you promoted was strategic voting. Really make sure that the least sincere politicians, that they don't get elected because you split your vote in other ways. Now, Sarah might not agree with that, but her point about voting, I agree with completely. Thanks for a chance to weigh in there.
Great to have you two on our program tonight. Mark Jaccard, Sarah Burch, always appreciate your visits to TVO, even virtually. Take good care, you two.
Thanks for having us.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.